I actually founded By Rotation as a side hustle, which has actually gained us the name as the Instagram of fashion rental. It wasn't until the honeymoon that I noticed a lot of textile waste in my suburban hometown to see how polluted it was, and the fact that I too had bought new clothes for this trip. And 90% of what we donate to charity shops ends up in Asian and African landfills. So By Rotation is a social network where you can lend and rent designer and premium items with each other. We've actually built the world's largest shared wardrobe. So we have over 120,000 peer-to-peer listings worth over £60 million on the app.
Today on the podcast, we have Eshita Kabra, who's the CEO and founder of By Rotation. They're the world's largest shared wardrobe, where you can rent, lend and resell your items. We learn Eshita's story, growing up in Singapore, moving to London, having a successful career in finance, before realising there was a problem which she wanted to be solved in the circular economy. We learn how she built her app on the side whilst working full-time, and what tipped her to go full-time, and how she's been able to grow substantially since then. Her passion really shines through in this episode, and I hope you enjoy. I'm Amma from the Bay HQ, and this podcast is powered by HSBC Innovation Banking. By Rotation is doing incredibly well now, and it's such an incredible story. But when you were a little kid, what did you want to be? Did you ever think one day I want to be an entrepreneur?
I knew that I wanted to be a business, like I wanted to have my own business, but I wasn't sure what I wanted it to be in. So when I was younger, I was really into graphic design and web design. It was the early 2000s, and we all had we were beginning to have laptops, and there was this website called neopets.com. I don't know if you know that, but it's like a virtual pet. Okay, you know it. And, as Asian parents, you're not allowed to have pets. And I was like, I always wanted a pet. So I really got into Neopets, and I learned how to graphic design myself, and then eventually also web design and code. And I was selling my layouts on the World Wide Web to random people who became my pen pals and friends. This is all before social media like Facebook and MySpace was a thing. And I was being paid in US dollars for my layouts, as they called it, on PayPal. And that was the really early days of PayPal too. And my parents were like, what are you doing until 2 a.m. on the laptop? This is shady. Like, we need to check the search history. We don't know what she's browsing. And they were just surprised to see that I had founded my own business selling websites online to strangers. And I think that's when they kind of knew that there's this entrepreneurial flair in me. And I started thinking about how I, at some point, would like to found my own business, but I just don't know what it's going to be in.
And obviously you didn't initially go down the path of full-time entrepreneurship, right? And what made you go down the path you did in terms of going to university and studying in the financial area as well?
So I went abroad for university. So I grew up in Singapore. I'm Indian, obviously, born in India, in Rajasthan in particular. And when I went to study abroad in the US and UK, it became very apparent to me that in order to be able to stay in the country after graduating, I would need to be sponsored by a large company as an international student, because I have an Indian passport, which, by the way, is such a nightmare when it comes to immigration. But I'm very proud to have that passport. And that's when I kind of realized that I'd need to do something a bit more corporate. And, I actually really enjoyed my 6.5 years working in investment management. I feel like it equipped me with a lot of these hard skills, analytical skills. It made me very professional. The kind of work ethic that you pick up working at one of these sort of I guess very corporate environments, it's pretty different to the various industries that I'm now working in, fashion, media. Sometimes these industries can be quite fluffy, and sometimes they're really all about, who you know rather than what you know. And I feel like my career in investments really made me much more, I guess, about substance over style, and really very merit oriented.
So that decision you made earlier on to move to the UK or the US at that point, that's just quite a big decision, right? For somebody who's grown up in Singapore, now wants to move abroad. And one of the things of this podcast is so many people who've been on here weren't born in this country, and they've moved here, and obviously there's a risk that's involved in that. Did that ever scare you at all about building your life here away from your family?
I don't know. know. I was the middle child. I am the middle child and middle child. Oh, really? Okay. We're quite rebellious, right? And we want attention. And often when we want attention, it's because we haven't gotten enough at home. So I was very excited to leave home. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but Singapore is also, it's a city state, right? If you go out to a bar or a club, chances are your parents' friends are going to find out and they're going to ask your parents about it, right? So I was like, I'm ready to leave home, right? And explore, the other side of the world. So I was very excited to go abroad. And actually, I spent a year in the US at a really great university. And then I realized that it wasn't really for me because it was It was a college town.
Okay.
Which was a big shock for someone who is a complete city girl. And so I actually moved to London instead, and then went to Cass Business School, which was in the center of London. And I enjoyed my time at the university so much that I actually did a placement year. So I worked for a year during my degree. And that's when I kind of realized that I actually really enjoy working in a corporate environment. And I particularly like working in London and the UK. And I was like, I'm ready to, stay here forever. And now I've been in the UK 13 and a half years.
And you mentioned there about the investment career you had as well. And do you think sometimes people are almost surprised by that, considering, like you said, in the fashion industry, there's people who often have very creative careers before that, for you to kind of shift from that corporate space into what you're doing?
Yeah. And I think that actually makes me stand out, so I've spent time on the trading floor as well. I've been an investor in public markets, so specifically bank bonds, which, they've become very sexy now, but it's sort of like it's very regulatory heavy. There's a lot of prospectuses that you're reading when you're investing in corporate bonds. And that's so different to what I'm doing now. But I think that almost makes me stand out more with this very homogenous fashion industry that we see in the UK, within Europe. Well, to be honest, most of Western fashion is very homogenous. And this has helped me stand out. And I actually, I talk about it more because I think it reminds people that we're disrupting the fashion industry with what we're doing at Biotation. We don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, like you said, because sometimes people can gloss over those kind of details, but it's one of your competitive advantages, right? Is that you have that solid background in the financials, which means that when you're competing against the other people, you've got something they don't have. But how did you make that transition? What's the story of going from investment world to Biotation? Like, what was the switch?
I actually founded Biotation as a side hustle. So the company's incorporated in April 2019, but I only went full time with it in October 2019. So I guess like most Asians, we're quite conservative or cautious, but we have so much more at risk here. I was here on a visa as well. I now have an indefinite leave to remain. And so I had to be very sure that this risk that I was taking with my career would actually pay off and made sense, because I would probably also have to leave the country if it didn't. So I was very careful to make sure we hit certain quantitative and qualitative targets before it really felt like the right thing to do. Because not only was I leaving my job, I was leaving the entire industry and career. And if it didn't work out, it would be very hard to re-enter. And funny enough, I actually went full-time with Biotation 5 months before COVID, where obviously there's no need to rent clothes and fashion, right? Because we were all in our PJs. But actually we used all that time to educate the audience and masses about why it's good to share items and more about the sharing economy and peer-to-peer in particular. And that helped us acquire new users. So a lot of user acquisition happened then, and in a very cost-effective digital manner. And then we also got a lot of supply on the app. So we had a lot of people listing their items, so that when we were out of COVID, we actually had a huge demand and a spike that we didn't even anticipate at all on the platform.
So for the people who aren't aware as well, what was the initial idea for Biotation?
So Biotation is a social network where you can lend and rent designer and premium items with each other. So you can save money, you can rent items for a fraction of retail value, often 10% for like a weekend. You can make money. Some of our top lenders make over £4,000 a month from their side hustle of renting out their wardrobe, because fashion is our first vertical. Some of them have funded their IVF journeys, they're paying for childcare, they're saving up for their mortgages or their next cocktail or holidays. It's like a myriad of reasons that people are using the app. You can also make new friends. So because it's a social network, you follow each other on the app. And what happens is people tend to repeat rent from the same person over and over again, which has actually gained us the name as the Instagram of fashion rental. And finally, but very importantly, because we are very mission oriented and we truly believe that there can be profit and purpose together. We believe that instead of, buying new products, you can share and therefore actually help fight overconsumption. So really our mission is to transform consumption for good. And we like to say, what's mine is yours in the buy rotation community. So we've been going for about 4.5 years now. And with our first vertical, which is fashion, we've actually built the world's largest shared wardrobe. So we have over 120,000 peer-to-peer listings worth over £60 million on the app, which is insane because you've got other incumbents that are inventory-based fashion rental and subscription models who've been around 13 to 15 years and are listed companies that have about half the stock that we have because we don't hold any stock. It's just sitting in people's wardrobes.
So your passion is really shining through here, but where did that come from? Why was this a problem that you cared so much about to go and do something about it?
Well, it was a problem that I wanted to solve for myself. So a very first world problem, but I was planning my honeymoon, which we know is a trip of a lifetime. And I was going back to Rajasthan where I was born, and I wanted to show my husband where I'm from, my roots, and reconnect with them. And so I started thinking about all my outfits that I wanted to wear while planning the itinerary, because I'm a control freak. No, just kidding. And that's when I started, kind of realizing there was a gap in the market for renting fashion here in the UK, in Europe. And then I started, kind of looking at the global fashion rental and sharing landscape. And it became very evident to me that all the players out there, be that in the US or in China and India and Singapore, where I grew up, they all had very inventory heavy, existing models, which were essentially dry cleaning businesses and logistics businesses. And I was like, why can't this be more like, people on social media who never repeat their outfits? Why don't they just share stuff with each other and get paid for it? And we take a commission. So kind of like Airbnb, Uber, all these sharing economy businesses that have become so global, so scalable. And that's when this idea sort of started brewing in my mind. It wasn't until the honeymoon, so a few months later, that I noticed a lot of textile waste in my suburban hometown. So 2 hours away from Udaipur, there's a place called Pilvara where I'm from. Not somewhere you'd go to as a tourist, but, a lot of my relatives still live there. And I hadn't been back for 14 years, and I was just surprised to see how polluted it was. And the fact that I too had bought new clothes for this trip, which I probably didn't love as much. I probably wouldn't wear them at least 30 times. That's apparently the optimum number. I'd say it's the minimum number of times you should wear a clothing item. And 90% of what we donate to charity shops ends up in Asian and African landfills. So I just couldn't help but feel I was part of the problem. I was this consumer, with a very consumerist mentality living in the Western Hemisphere, sending stuff back to my own country. It just felt very racist. And it doesn't help that the fashion industry is also, if you look at its representation, it can seem a bit exclusive also. So that's when I thought, why don't I come up with this idea, enact it and try it out with my friends and see if I can build a marketplace and eventually a social network to connect people. But I've grown up in Singapore, which, the national hobbies there are shopping and eating, and I was very good at the former. So it just kind of
feels...
I'm
good at the latter.
Okay, there we go. There we go. We're good Singaporeans here. And that's why I kind of felt like it seemed very much like something I would use myself. And what's really interesting is I continue to use my app every single day, but I'm no longer a top lender or renter, which is great.
Yeah. You had this amazing idea, right? And you've got the investment background. What was the first steps you took to try and make it a reality? You've got the blank canvas. What was the steps you took?
I decided, which is unlike a lot of people in the fashion consumer media space, I decided to actually do a soft launch very quickly in a very scrappy manner. So the first thing I did is I already started planning in the last leg of the honeymoon to do an event, Facebook events. God.
Ooh,
do we still have this? Yeah, throwback, right? I made one and I invited all my friends with the context of meeting my dog because I was going to get a puppy when I came back from the honeymoon. I said, come and meet my dog. You'll get to meet him. And I want to run a business idea by you. So I put them together. And so it was my 1-bedroom in Marylebone. And I invited them all over on a rainy Saturday when I got back from the honeymoon. And they got to meet my puppy, Saffron. And then I told them about the idea, and I had rails of clothing, and I asked them to bring their clothes too. And I said, what do you think of this? And, my friends to date, the ones, my true friends outside what I do, they're all bankers, lawyers, consultants, all of that stuff. And they were like, this is a bit strange. It's weird. We get it. And it could work, but we're not your early adopters. Like we need to see it stick a bit. And that kind of makes sense because I myself I'm not really the person who's the first one to download a new app and try out a new marketplace. Like I kind of see it around and I get influenced by influencers and writers and people like that. So I was like, okay, well, it sounds like they would use it, but they wouldn't be the first ones to use it. And that's when I realized, let me very quickly experiment by creating like a shabby, quick marketplace. And so there's this website called Share Tribe, where for $199, I don't know if they've increased their price, they should. You can kind of see there's a product market fit for a marketplace idea. So I used that and very quickly configured it in some brand colors that I thought would be very appropriate to buy rotation. And we pushed it out there. We made an Instagram account. We tried to engage with people that we thought would be relevant for us within the UK in particular. And we started seeing traction, and we got picked up by fashion and broadsheet press. Next thing you know, you've got, like a mention of us in Guardian on the weekend. And it started becoming very real. We started seeing transactions happen on the Scrappy, Share Tribe, white label solution platform that we made from rotators, as we call them, between Nottingham and London. And that's when I realized this isn't something I'm doing with my friends. It's actually random people in the UK that I don't even know.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you've been trying to do. HSBC have got the team that are built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing. They've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hsbcinnovationbanking.com. And I think what's cool about it as well, you mentioned about when you were a kid that you did the website stuff, and it's how it's now joining the dots backwards, right? How it helps you. And I think a lot of people forget about that. Those kind of skills can be really useful when you start a business. Mm-hmm. And even for like our own stuff, I used to be a tech consultant for 7 years. So the entire website was built by me, all the CRM and things. And it's a massive shortcut. Yeah. Rather than having to hire somebody to work it out, you just did it yourself and you could get that first level going. And you also mentioned how it wasn't too long before COVID started when you went full time. How was that experience? Because you're like first time entrepreneur, like full time, and this massive world changing thing is happening. How did you deal with that? How did you weather that?
Yeah, it was really annoying because I was like, oh man, I could have had a tab open and, still have a stable salary, and actually have the best of both worlds. And it was pretty unfortunate, I thought. But actually, we were pushing by rotation so actively on social media that I'm pretty sure I couldn't keep both jobs. I had to let compliance already know that I had become a director of a company and that it wasn't competing with what I was doing at the last place that I was at, which is a hedge fund. But I definitely could not have pushed by rotation as much when it came to educating people during COVID, running Instagram live series to build my own network within the fashion industry through COVID. I mean, think about it. I knew no one within the fashion and the media industries because I'm an immigrant. I worked mostly in finance my entire life. All my friends are very corporate. They don't really know fashion or media people either. And I didn't go to the same schools as most of the people who work in these industries do. So I had no way of, making it and getting in. And in a weird way, COVID was an equalizer for this industry where, if I wanted to network with this person, I didn't need to be invited to a particular event to find them and to meet them. I had access to them directly just by messaging or emailing them. And that really helped because I really built my network during COVID. And obviously COVID is a terrible thing, but it helped me kind of really push our brand out there very digitally, which is what we are anyway. We're completely peer-to-peer, and we're a tech business more than anything else.
So from my experience of obviously follow you on Instagram, seeing what you've been posting things, I'd always assumed you would know people from your entire life, because you seem so incredibly connected now, and to be able to build that in such a short amount of time is something I think a lot of people can learn from as well, in the scrap niche and the way you did that. And do you have any advice for anybody who is entering an industry where they're not an insider, they don't know anybody? How can they try and make those connections in the way that you did?
Yeah, thank you. And to be honest, it is still very painstaking, and I'm very big on grassroots activation. I still tell my team, and I still do it myself. So, in the very early days, while I was running By Rotation as a side hustle, in the evenings and weekends, I would go to a lot of networking events within sustainable fashion or the fashion industry, whichever seemed open to someone who was a no one, right? And I would go there and I would sit front row. And, once the panel is over, they'd be like, do you have any questions? And I would always raise my hand up. And I would say, my name is Eshita Kabra. I'm the founder and CEO of By Rotation. Not that anyone knows what By Rotation was, right? We were an Instagram account with 200 followers, all my friends. And I would beg them to like every post. And I started sort of networking with people that way, just by being outspoken, by showing initiative, by showing up. It's these three things that kind of made me more and more a voice and someone that is to be noted within the industry. And then, each time I was invited to speak on panels, be it small random panels. I remember once going all the way to speak at a university course, which had it was just before COVID. It was the day that they were going to announce that there was a lockdown. And I was like, I think something weird is happening. I'm not sure I should be going. But I went anyway to speak at a university course, and there were only 4 people there, and I thought, what am I doing? Right. But I was like, you know what? Everything's going to amount to something. And actually, I have been invited back to the university and had a full house when we did a Zoom interview later during COVID. So, it's one of those things where it every small thing you do does actually result in the bigger picture. So now it may seem like I have a very good network and I'm well connected, but it's really come from me showing up. It does also help that I live quite centrally, and that's a strategic decision that we've made. It seems a bit crazy to live right in the center of London, but it helps me get around to 4 different events within a day. And what I do a lot, and I almost see my job now 4.5 years later of By Rotation having a very, it has a very great flywheel where our renters are becoming our lenders, and our lenders are becoming our renters. So that's also why it's called By Rotation. And, the business is kind of doing so well on its own that I actually spend a lot of my time being more like a missionary. I speak at panels and conferences. I record podcast episodes because my job is to tell you about how great By Rotation is and what we've achieved and what else we're doing and what our mission is. So I think it's really about being present and also being grassroots. I still talk to my top lenders and my top renters, and I love to meet people. Next week, I'm speaking at a university, and then another university the week after.
Earlier on in the podcast, you mentioned some of the amazing numbers you've been able to do with the business. And that journey it seems incredibly fast, how you've been able to do that. What were some of the biggest obstacles you overcame on that way? What are some of the mistakes you made that you learned from to make the business stronger and to make yourself stronger too?
I suppose it isn't really a mistake, because now we've realized it's fine that we did it, but I suppose we could have avoided doing it. So we launched both our Android and our iOS app at the same time. And our engineering team is only 4 people full-time in-house, which is very small, by the way, for the fact that we're building a marketplace and a social network that's both in the UK and US now. And we were given advice that we should only focus on the iOS. But anyway, we went ahead and did the Android app, which I think, sometimes we'll see the development lagging behind the iOS, and you'll have some users who are more frustrated and they're like, how come this, we've told you that we have this phone, you said you have an app for our phone and it's not working properly. So, that's something, I guess, in hindsight, maybe we shouldn't have been so ambitious about. But now it's absolutely necessary because, we do get quite a few of our top lenders who are using the Android app. The other thing that we didn't do, which, we had a lot of journalists, especially fashion editors who are a bit more old school, telling us, oh, great, it's an app. That's great. But I want to use the website. I'm not downloading an app. And we were like, no, this is not a website. We want you to download the app because it's a community. It's a social network. So, we kind of stood by, our platform and like our strategy. And I think that really paid off. But I think, looking back at it now, I would have actually invested more in SEO a bit earlier. Even if the website wasn't fully transactional, we should have actually built out the catalog online earlier. But now we've done that and we're actually really top performing on SEO because our name is also interesting. Even my dad misspelt my name. So I always show up on Google search first, which is great. But yeah, I think that's something I would have changed. And then what's, I would say, consistently a challenge is fundraising. And I think it's, I think everyone knows this. It's not even something that we need to discuss at length, but I think it's really, really difficult when, when you think about institutional funding, especially in the earlier stages of a startup, it tends to be venture. Venture funding tends to be mostly, white males who kind of make, they're the investment partners who make the decisions at the end of the day. You might have an associate who's, a person of color or a woman or whatever, but oftentimes the deal is then brought in to the IC, which tends to be all white males. So it's kind of difficult if the words like fashion are used, even though we're really a social network and a marketplace. And that's been kind of challenging to convince some people. That being said, some people who are very happy to put their prejudice aside and look really at our great numbers, they're the ones who ended up in our cap table. So we are venture backed. My lead investor, he is a white male. He sits on my board and he's been very, very supportive. And what I like about a few of the investors out there is that they just care about the numbers and the service. If it makes sense, they're like, it doesn't matter that you're a female, that you're an immigrant, you're a solo founder and all of that. We just really believe in the vision and how you're executing.
So I've obviously seen your deck, right? And we see hundreds of decks, but yours is actually really good. And I can say that like on camera of where we see so many that just are a bit muddled. Like you're very clear with the numbers, you're clear with the message about how you make the money, everything in there. So it's a really good deck in terms of how it's been laid out and you can clear the storytelling and the narrative through it. So while it can be sometimes, you said, like people believing in what you're doing in the mission, it's also you've put that incredibly well in the storytelling to convince them to do it.
Thank you.
So it's also a skill that you and your company have done too.
Thank you.
So we're going to need to use quick fire questions in a moment. But you mentioned before about this being your first vertical with fashion. So what is the dream for Biotation? Say 10 years time, what can people expect?
Yeah, we want to be global. So we want to be global, in every country that you would be visiting. We want you to be able to rotate from your local communities. So about 2 months ago, we launched a new feature, which is rent by location. So it's even better than a dating app because you can see what's around your radius and you can rent something even last minute. So that's why we call it global, right? Global and local communities. And really, we're getting very hyper-local with it. We're having people rent from their neighbors and, from people down their street whom they've always admired in terms of their fashion. And yeah, our long-term mission is really to transform consumption for good. So we see ourselves as part of the sharing economy, less e-commerce, less fashion. The name is also Biotation. It's not kind of paying a nod to the fashion industry in particular either. And that's been a very, it's been something that I've thought about since I launched the company. It's not a new thing. And we've already seen other verticals come up very organically on the app. So we've seen high-end luggage being listed. So Rimowa, Samsonite, Antler suitcases. We've seen things like baby carriers, like the Artie Pope. I think that's how you pronounce that brand. It's £400 for a baby carrier. It's very wasteful to buy it because I guess your baby will grow very quickly, and it comes in different colors and prints, and men and women like to carry it to match their outfits on holidays and weddings and things like that. So we're kind of seeing new verticals come very organically on the app without any marketing or push. I think what we have in common with these different verticals is that they all tend to be working professionals who have high disposable incomes and care more about access than ownership. So the user persona is the same. It's not going to be like a messy experience where, there's like a power drill and like a pair of Manolo Blahniks on the heel, on the app.
So we have to move to quick fire questions now. It's been great to hear your story and everything you've been up to. So first quick fire question. Who are 3 British Asians that you'd love to shout out that you think are doing incredible work?
It's definitely got to be Akash Mehta. He is the co-founder and CEO of Fable and Mane, which is the hair care company. I love how much he puts himself out there. Also very successful, by the way. And I know age is just a number, but I'm very inspired by him. I love that he wants to create his own big empire of, South Asian beauty and sort of wellness. Because I think we need that. I haven't seen that a lot. And I see a lot of Western brands taking it from us. And then I want to give a shout out to Denika Methani, who is a partner at Cherry VC. She's also one of my angel investors. And actually the story is that she was a customer on the app and she found me at this pop-up store that we had at Westfield that they very kindly paid for and made for us right after she gave birth, because she really wanted to invest in biorotation. She insisted and said, I don't know if you have a round open, but I really want to get involved in this. How can I get involved? How can I write you a check? And I was like, okay, she has used the product. She's very serious. She really wants to back me. And it's nice to have a Singaporean Indian woman who's doing so well on the other side of the table, because I do want to see more representation of female VCs, people of color VCs who are able to write the tickets themselves without waiting for the rest of their team to do so. I want to give a shout out to Divya Thani. She's the editor of Condé Nast Traveler. I'm so happy to see more, people of color in these pages, because people need to hear our voices and see things from our perspective. She's been very supportive. I think she just moved to London maybe a couple of years ago. And she's killing it in the travel space. And apparently the travel industry is like the industry of 2024. So definitely someone to watch.
Yeah, heard of all of those guys. Well, Akash's been on the podcast before, but the others are amazing great as well. So next question. If people want to find out more about you, more about biorotation, where should they go to? They
should definitely download the free app. It's called Biorotation, so BY rotation, not BUI. Do not buy. The whole point is not to buy. It's free to download. We love men, women, everyone on the app. And you can also find us on our social media, which is Biorotation, or our website, biorotation.com. And if you want to follow me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Eshita Kabra, or you can follow me on Instagram, which is Aren't You Eshita. If you know the show Curb Your Enthusiasm, you'll understand why my name is that.
And is there anything that you need help with right now, or Biorotation needs help with, that the audience could help you with?
There's this really great movement that has been created, which is more about women. It's called Buy Women Built. And it's a very simple saying, which is, if you cannot invest in women, then buy products that are made by women. So use the Biorotation app if you're not investing in us.
Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on today. Have you got any final words to the audience?
Thanks so much for having me on the show, and I hope to see the people who are tuning in on the Biorotation app.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.